I'm done being funny. Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, you're going to learn how to teach and or review equivalent fractions, starting with the concrete way and then working your way to the abstract. Ooh, let's get started. For this lesson, you need Brainycamp, which you can get for a free 30-day trial. This equivalent fractions anchor chart, which you can use as notes. And this equivalent fractions worksheet, which you can have your students work in pairs to complete. So to set up Brainycamp, if you do not have a license for it, you can click on the free 30-day trial. After you've created your account for your free trial, you're going to go to Accounts. And then you'll scroll down to where it says My Students. And this is where you get to create a username and password that all your students will be able to get into Brainycamp for free. So choose your username and password. Make it something simple that your students will be able to remember. And you can use the same username as your password. The beautiful thing about Brainycamp is that with that free 30-day trial, you have 30 days of free access to all of their manipulatives. So whatever username and password that you give to your students, when they log in, it will automatically save on their computer and it will show them to all the manipulatives that Brainycamp has to offer. Ooh, so many math goodies. For this part of the lesson, you're going to have your students explore using the fraction tiles. So all your students will click on fraction tiles, and then the fraction tiles will be here. Now, how I like to start off this lesson is first asking the students, what are equivalent fractions? Or what word sounds similar to equivalent? And that will get your kids to guessing, like, okay, equivalent fractions means equal fractions. And so that's when you will have your children explore and tell them to show something like 1/2. So if they show 1/2, then you're going to say, all right, now I want you to find as many equivalent fractions as you can with these fraction tiles. And that's when you're going to start to notice that some kids are going to go with each fraction tile to see. And they're going to notice like, 2/3, that's a little too large. So they will click and erase. Then they'll try the fourths. And oh wow, those fourths are equal to 1/2. Now, you might have some students say that 1/2 equals 1/4 because they're just looking at the label on the fraction tiles. However, remind them about that 3rd grade standard to where if you have 2 1/4, that's the same thing as having 2/4. Okay? And then you're going to continue to see what other equivalent fractions they can show with this. And so you'll get a lot of people doing a little trial and error. They're going to be, this is the exploring part. You're not going to tell them, you're wrong, you shouldn't be getting fifths. You're going to let them see for themselves that the fifths, you can't have any fifths that are equivalent to 1/2. So here are all the equivalent fractions that you can make for 1/2 with the fraction tiles. So you'll have students volunteer and say 2/4 is equivalent to 1/2. 3/6 is equivalent to 1/2. 4/8 is equivalent to 1/2. Another student, 5/10 is equivalent to 1/2. 6/12 is equivalent to 1/2. So they'll be able to figure this out just using these concrete fraction tiles that are virtual. Now, that's when you could be like, all right, guys, so let's clear all. And now I want you to show 3/4. Now, you're going to get some students who start moving the thirds. And they're going to get either 3 or 4 of them, okay? And when you see this happen, just kindly remind them, make sure you're showing 3/4. 3/4, not 4/3. Okay? And that can help some of the students correct it themselves. So this is how you show 3/4. And now you're going to say, find some equivalent fractions for 3/4. And you'll have students go again with each of the fraction tiles and do trial and error. And then you'll see that most of them will get it that 3/4 is also equivalent to 6/8. They'll also see that 3/4 is equivalent to 9/12. All right. So when they do this and when they show this, encourage them to actually write what those fractions are. So encourage them on their Brainycamp screen to write 3/4 equals 6/8. And then also have them write again 3/4 equals 9/12. Now, this part is really good to do with upper elementary, so fourth and fifth grade, especially fifth grade, because if you're about to teach adding and subtracting fractions, they have to know how to create equivalent fractions without using visual models. So, this is good to get them started as a review because some of them might start seeing a multiplication pattern from the 3/4 to the 6/8 or from the 3/4 to the 9/12. But if some of them don't see it yet, that's okay. You'll just have them clear all and show them another fraction to show. So have them show 2/5 and ask them to find equivalent fractions using the fraction tiles for 2/5. And when they do this, they'll clearly see that the only ones with the fraction tiles they can make is 4/10. So 2/5 will equal 4/10. Now, something about that, you're going to make sure that they write 2/5 equals 4/10 on their Brainycamp screen because you want them to visually see that. And hopefully it will move them to the abstract of thinking about equivalent fractions. So at this part of the lesson, if you have fourth or fifth grade, mostly fifth grade, you can ask them, so let's review. We see that 2/5 clearly equals 4/10, but what if we didn't have the fraction tiles? What did we multiply the numerator and denominator with? Or instead of being that direct, you can ask, do you see a pattern from 2/5 to 4/10? And then see if students come up with, hey, if I multiply 2 times 2, that gets me 4, which is the equivalent fraction numerator. And if I do 5 times 2, that gets me 10, which is the equivalent fraction denominator. So once a student or some students figure this out, say, aha, so you can create equivalent fractions without visual models by multiplying the numerator and denominator by the same number. So if you want to really drive the point home, you can keep having some examples and have them finding equivalent fractions for that example. So let's say 2/3. You'll see that your students will go through the fraction tiles. Some of your students will actually go straight to the 6 and say 4/6 equals 2/3. And then some of your students, they'll notice that 8/12 equals 2/3. So then that's when you're going to remind them, okay, so let's write this on our screen. 2/3 equals 4/6. And then when you do this, remind them like, ask them, what if we didn't have these fraction tiles? How can we tell that these are equivalent fractions? And then someone could see that the pattern is, what do we multiply the numerator and denominator with for 2/3 to get 4/6? And someone could notice that 2 times 2 equals 4. So if I do the same exact thing to the denominator, I get 6. So as long as you multiply the numerator and denominator by the same number, you will get an equivalent fraction. Now, if you want to go a little more advanced with them and ask, why does this work? You can explain to them that this is the same as multiplying by one whole. whenever you are multiplying or dividing the numerator and denominator by the same number, you are just basically multiplying or dividing by one whole. Okay? And that will just be like a whoa, that's so cool. Yeah. So that'll be something that some more advanced students will be like, oh wow, okay. And even your students who aren't so advanced, because it's good for them to know this. So they don't just think that, oh, I'm just multiplying numbers together. Like, no, this is the same thing as multiplying by one. And anything times one is itself. So it's the same thing with fractions. So by this point, your fourth or fifth graders should be catching on and seeing that, okay, what do I multiply the numerator and denominator with to get this equivalent fraction of 8/12? And you can even ask 2 times what equals 8. Now, some kids might tell you 16 because they actually multiply them together. But remind them, I'm not saying 2 times 8. I'm saying 2 times what equals 8. And then that's when they can realize, okay, well, 2 times 4 equals 8. So I'm going to do the same exact thing to the denominator. So 3 times 4 equals 12. And the beautiful thing about this is that these fraction tiles are showing the concrete way of how to deal with equivalent fractions. And then what we are writing is showing the abstract way of how to create our equivalent fractions. So seeing both of these on their Brainycamp screen will be so helpful for them to make that connection and slowly drift away from the concrete fraction tiles and go to creating equivalent fractions abstractly. So after students have explored in Brainycamp, if your class does an interactive notebook, I highly recommend you purchasing this equivalent fractions anchor chart because this will be a really good resource for your students to have so that they can know how to create equivalent fractions abstractly. Another thing that would be great for you to have is an activity to do after you've done the Brainycamp and after you've done the notes. And I believe this is a great activity for you to use. So this is an equivalent fractions worksheet. You can put this in a sheet protector and have pages 3 and 4 in a sheet protector on the front and back. And students can use dry erase markers to actually fill in the missing equivalent fractions. They can also show what multiplication or division pattern, how they got from one fraction to the other. And this will be good of having them graduate from the concrete and go to the more abstract way of creating equivalent fractions. If you are virtual, then this will also be good because there's an easel activity where you can go through Teachers Pay Teachers, and when you buy it, your students can write on the activity. So all in all, this is a wonderful activity to end off your lesson. Well, that's all, folks. Make sure that you end your lesson with the exit ticket so you can see what your students learned. And if you like what you saw, please subscribe and click that like button and also leave a comment. If you didn't like what you saw, I don't know what to tell you. All right, well, I'll see you soon. Bye.